Welcome, everybody, to Inside Boxing Daily on the Grueling Truth Sports Network. I'm your co-host for Inside Boxing Daily, Mike Goodpaster. And right now, I'd like to welcome in my co-host, Jeremiah Preisser. How you doing, Jeremiah?
I'm doing very damn well. Let's get this show started.
Yeah, and we would like to start off by thanking everybody that listened last night to our inaugural debut episode. We really appreciate it. Hopefully you guys will come back every night at this time, except for Thursday night. But now, tomorrow night, we may have to do Thursday night anyways, Jeremiah. So, unless you can do earlier for the weekly show with John at like 8.
Okay, 8. I probably can't do that.
All right.
But I'll see.
All right, guys. So tonight we're going to start off Alexander Usyk. Today, Eddie Hearn said that Usyk will make his heavyweight debut on May 18th, possibly against Alexander Povetkin, which seems the most plausible candidate to me, Jeremiah, Joseph Parker, or Luis Ortiz. Now, the thing that stands out to me is, why does Hearn keep mentioning Luis Ortiz? Because Ortiz is supposed to fight Christian Hammer on March 2nd at the Barclays Center in Brooklyn, New York.
I don't know, man. It's a bit confusing. I don't know if he's just paying lip service to keep Ortiz content. I really don't know. I mean, Ortiz is obviously going to be floated if he keeps winning. I mean, he's fighting Christian Hammer, who actually, broke the top 10 somehow. That kind of shows you how weak the heavyweight division is. But he broke the top 10, I think it was a year or two ago. But yeah, I don't know. Maybe he's just floating his name around as a potential foe for somebody. I don't know. But like you said, his calendar is booked right now, so it doesn't look like he's going to get any big fights. But I don't know. I think still, even though he's paying lip service to it, I think Ortiz will get a sizable fight here in the future. I mean, Hearn's got a lot of good heavyweights under his, in his stable right now, so he'll find somebody to give him to.
Yeah, now, I would love to see Usyk fight Ortiz. I don't think that's going to happen. I think it's going to be Povetkin over Parker. What's your take on that?
Yeah, maybe. I mean, I'm trying to think of what the deal is with Povetkin. I don't know if it was 2 years or how exactly that deal was set up. I don't really pay attention to the financial aspects of the game and all those intricacies. A lot of times it doesn't matter to me. The fights will get done if they want them to get done. But I think that'd be an interesting fight if he does so. I mean, that's a pretty big leap for Usyk. He's not really, if that's his housewarming party, then I'm all for it. I mean, I like Povetkin and I like Usyk, but, to me, Usyk is going to be a major player in the heavyweight division. And regardless if it's Joseph Parker, Luis Ortiz, Alexander Povetkin, I think he beats all those guys. And I think he potentially beats the best in the division too. So the sooner the better, in my opinion.
All right. So what would your take be on Joseph Parker against him? Because Joseph Parker, very talented heavyweight, doesn't have the punching power that, others have that we just mentioned. But where do you see him and Parker there if they were to fight?
Yeah, I actually think that's the best matchup of the three because I think Povetkin and Ortiz, even though they're past their best, I think they're both more nuanced than Joseph Parker. Parker can box and move a little bit. He's got a pretty good work rate for a heavyweight, but after watching his performances against the best opponents he's ever taken on, in White and Joshua, he just seems pretty set in stone with how he is stylistically. Again, he's a good boxer, but he's not a great boxer. I mean, as we saw, he just wasn't throwing enough punches. He lacks some nuance, in my opinion. His jab isn't as active as it should be. So to me, because of his lack of pop, I think he would be the best opponent for Usyk. I think it would be an interesting styles matchup, but if Parker chooses to back away or, I think that Usyk could very well just box in the center of the ring and beat him, especially with Parker being a little bit smaller than some of the heavyweights as well. I think that's the best opponent for him, honestly. And Parker, he'd make a nice little payday for it. But again, Parker coming at, if Parker chooses to get aggressive with Usyk, either way, honestly, it doesn't matter if Parker backs up. It doesn't matter if he comes forward. He's just not on that level.
All right, and then we had another fight announced today, March 24th, PBC on FS1, Lipinets Peterson versus Sergey Lipinets. What's your take on this one? Peterson, to me, I think is old, and I think this would have been a really good fight a couple of years ago.
Yeah, I think so too. But I think because, Peterson is a PBC guy, he's been hanging around and under the the Al Heyman banner for so long that, like a lot of these guys who are loyal, they keep you getting these matchups and getting the paydays. I mean, you look at a guy like Leo Santa Cruz. I mean, the guy named his son. I think he named his son Al after Al Heyman. So they have a tight knit relationship. Yeah, I mean. But to be honest with you, I've seen Sergey Lipinets on Twitter, and he's like, hey, Al Heyman takes care of his guys. I know there's a lot of Heyman haters, and that's fine. Again, this isn't brand loyalty for me. It's not one of those Ford Chevy type things. I just want to see the best fight the best. And obviously this is not that kind of a fight. But I think at this stage, with Sergey Lipinets officially moving to 147, Peterson still being serviceable even though he's past his prime, I think it's a good fight. I mean, Peterson is pretty tough to stop. I know he got beat up by Errol Spence, but again, it took some rounds. This isn't like Ocampo who folded in a round. Peterson does have some grit. He is a well-rounded fighter still, and I think it's a good test for Lipinets. It will be a bar to see kind of how Lipinets will fare in the future. And again, because he's a PBC guy, he'll be on the menu for some of these other guys as well.
Yeah, and especially, I'm all right with it just because Lipinets is coming off a loss to Mikey Garcia. He's moving up to welterweight. This is a lot better than what they could have picked out for him.
Yeah, no, I agree with you, man. And I think it's an interesting styles matchup too, because Peterson is a well-rounded guy. I mean, if he chooses to box, again, he is old. I don't need to keep prefacing with that, but I still think that he can box near a world-class level, and I just want to see how Lipinets deals with that, because Peterson can fight, he can box. So if he chooses to integrate both into his game plan for the fight, it'll be interesting to see how Lipinets adjusts, whether he can get it done, and I think he will. Whether he'll stop him, it's kind of another matter. I mean, I do think Lipinets hits pretty hard. I mean, he's accurate. The problems I've seen with him in the past is, he can track a guy down if he needs to. We saw that against who's a southpaw? I can't quite remember. I've seen him spar, Sean Porter effectively, and he has a pretty good jab, and he's got good foot movement. I'm not sure what he's been up to since, but Lipinets showed that he can track a guy down if he needs to. He can also fight a little bit, but his problem is even though Buddy McGirt is working with him and his jab has improved, it seems like his boxing IQ has gotten a little better. He still has a tendency to throw one shot at a time, much too much. And to really be effective at the world level, you got to break out of that. I mean, unless you're, Cost Zoo and you are a world-class amateur and your accuracy is fantastic, it's tough to do. One shot at a time usually doesn't get it done. And Lipinets, I think, needs to understand that. He needs to put a lot more water in the basement, bang those shots to the body. And again, we'll see. I think it's a good test so far.
All right, and then we got Jamel Herring gets a title shot May 25th against Masayuki Ito, and that'll be in Camp Pendleton at the Marine Corps base in Southern California. What's your take on this? Who do you like here? Ito's coming off an upset to win the title last year. He's defending against Herring. What's your take on this one?
Well, I think it's a pretty interesting styles matchup, and I also have to think I would just say off the bat that you got to give Top Rank some credit, because Herring, I believe, was a PBC guy before, and he lost. Who did he get beat up by? Shafikov. He was put over his head, and you can kind of understand, because Herring was a pretty good amateur, but Top Rank has taken over the reins, and they've managed to put him into this trinket shot. So again, you got to give them credit. But in terms of the styles, I think it's a good fight. I think I favor Herring. It's kind of tough. Ito is really he's kind of stereotypical of a lot of the Japanese fighters, where he's gritty, he'll go out and get it, and he'd love to see that sort of stuff. But typically they falter at the highest of levels, except if they're fighting, under, 126 or under. So it seems to me that Herring's nuance will probably get a decision win in this one. But I think it's going to be close, and I think it's going to be gritty. Ito's going to be a bit like Shafikov in the sense that he's going to come forward and throw a lot of punches. Whether Herring can capitalize on the counter punches or not is yet to be seen. But I see it as about a 60-40 fight in Herring's favor, and he's excited for it. But the coolest thing, I think, is that it's going to be at Camp Pendleton. I can't remember the last time a fight had taken place on a base like that.
Yeah, and the great thing about that, ESPN is going to play this up too because Herring was a Marine. The other thing is the date is doubly significant to Herring. It's on a holiday weekend in tribute to the U.S. soldiers who lost their lives fighting for their country. But it's also, I think it's like 10 years to the date when his 2 month old baby died. So, ESPN's going to be all over this.
Yeah, and I think they should. I mean, we've talked about in the past how boxing lacks a way of personalizing guys. I mean, when it was on free TV and you got familiar with these folks before they even turned professional. You remember you talked about the profiles that they used to run.
Well, that was like the 1984 Olympic Games. They
right.
would have before Mark Breland's first fight, they'd have a 5-minute feature on him where they interview him. They show his career up there. They tell a little bit about his life. Robert Shannon, who lost in the second round to a South Korean, he still sticks out to me just because of the 5-minute story I saw about him, even though he lost the fight right after that. So I think that was huge in making boxing as big as it was in the 70s and 80s. They did the same thing in 1976. That's how you learn, not just that Sugar Ray Leonard and Howard Davis and Michael Spinks, Leon Spinks were great fighters. You also learned the backstory, which gave you some kind of an emotional connection, which you really miss nowadays. And that's the bad thing to me about HBO being gone, because HBO would do the same thing where you'd get 5 or 6 minutes about that fighter, the way he grew up, and the things that had happened to him during his career. And I think you really miss that emotional connection because even on Fox TV, they do that now a little bit. And I think that'll help. You get it on Fox, CBS, all those stations. But
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So, I mean, Herring's story, it's an endearing one to many of us. I mean, America is a big warrior culture. So, and, if you follow him on Twitter, he's pretty damn active. I mean, across, I think, Facebook and Twitter, and he talks about the Marines a lot. So, yeah, that'll be a good selling point. So, I mean, I guess a lot of, Americans are going to root for him, and I guess that makes some sense. I guess it would suck if he gets upset here, but yeah, I'm looking forward to the fight, and I think it's interesting, and yeah.
All right. Real quick, we're going to take a 1-minute break to listen to a commercial for Ringside Boxing Show with Dennis Taylor, John Raspani, which you can hear every Sunday night at 8 o'clock Eastern on thegruelingtruth.net. We'll be back to finish up the second half of the show to talk a little bit about Eusebio Pedroza, Ali-Terrell on this day. We'll be back right after this.
Hey, this is Dennis Taylor, host of the Ringside Boxing Show, inviting you to join us every week right here on the Grueling Truth Sports Network for a high-energy romp through the always fascinating world of professional boxing. We give you 90 scintillating minutes that includes insight from our expert analysts, professional boxer Travis Hartman, boxing journalist Rizwan Zahid, and nationally known author and boxing writer John J. Responti. We give you an update on the United Kingdom boxing scene from British correspondent Paul McLaughlin, and amazing tours through the storied past of professional boxing with our historian Christopher James Shelton. Not to mention a 10-year legacy of more than 500 world-class guests. If you're a boxing junkie, the Ringside Boxing Show is the tonic you're going to need every week. Check us out and discover why we have the most listened to podcast on the Grueling Truth Sports Network.
The hottest, sweatiest show on West Coast radio.
All right, guys, we're back on Inside Boxing Daily. I'm Mike Goodpaster with Jeremiah Preisser. And Jeremiah, we've learned a little bit about Eusebio Pedroza suffering from cancer, insufficient blood flow to the brain. And from what we read earlier today, the next few hours were very important, but it doesn't sound good for Pedroza, who was the WBA featherweight world champion from 1978 to 1985. Had a record 19 consecutive title defenses, was inducted into the Hall of Fame in Canastota in 1999. What are your recollections of Eusebio Pedroza?
Well, as somebody who wrote a lengthy piece on Eusebio Pedroza, I know quite a bit about his career. And to be honest with you, I wasn't really familiar with him. I mean, the article was written at the request of somebody else, and so I watched everything that he'd been in. And one thing that I've noticed is that he gets a lot of flack for being dirty in some of the fights, and that's absolutely true. But, it's also true that the guy had a ton of skill. I mean, he wouldn't have hung out on that top for that long And, you even look at some of the predictions and whatnot. A lot of people were hoping that he fights Salvador Sanchez, clear things up in the featherweight division. And, just for myself, I think it would have been a close fight. I probably would have favored Sanchez there. But no, I mean, the Lockridge fight, he did have some questionable calls. I thought he lost, the first Lockridge fight. But the quality of competition that he beat consistently, I mean, he did come out on top. He did get the official decisions. Some of these guys he clearly did beat. I mean, I thought he beat Lockridge in the rematch. I mean, yeah, the guy was just highly damn skilled. The defense total is a little blown up, but I mean, the guy was just defensively good, offensively nuanced, and he fought in a damn good era. I mean, it sucks because I actually think he could have fought better people. He fought good people as it is, but that was sort of when all these junior and super classes were kind of coming about, and a lot of people were trinket picking. Like I love Jeff Fennick, but he did a little bit of that, and a lot of these guys missed each other, because of that sort of stuff. But Pedroza was fantastic, and he earned his spot in the International Boxing Hall of Fame. Rocky Lockridge, who is not doing well either. I wish he would get his stay in Canastota as well. I think he's worthy. We've talked about that on air as well. But no, Pedroza was fantastic, and it sucks because I think it's pancreatic cancer, which he's suffering from, and I think that's the deadliest form. Yeah. So it's not looking good, and we'll just kind of have to stay tuned. I know that was I think the reports came out today or yesterday, and I'm surprised that almost nobody was talking about this. I mean, I had saw it on a forum somewhere, and it kind of seemed to be buried away. But yeah, I mean, obviously the McGuigan fight sticks out for me as well. Not necessarily because he lost, but because he was able to reign for so long, and McGuigan was on top of his game that night, and it was just a good time. And, like we say with Sugar Ray Leonard, it was almost like looking back on a golden era.
Yeah, and I think the thing that concerns me the most or disappoints me the most is the fact, like 77, 78, 79, the competition wasn't great for him. In his 16th fight, though, he fights Alfonso Zamora, who was a great fighter, heavy hitter, got knocked out by him, but he recovered, went on to win the title, had a win over Ruben Olivares. He had the 2 Lockridge fights. The one that stands out to me is Pat Forde, because Pat Forde, I think, went the distance with Salvador Sanchez, and Pedroza actually stopped Forde. Doesn't mean that Pedroza beat Sanchez, because I'm like you. I kind of lean towards Sanchez also. Beat Jose Caba, who was a tough guy. Bernard Taylor. I think the Bernard Taylor fight was a draw, if I remember right. Jorge Lujan. I think Jorge Lujan was his last title defense. Then he loses the fight to Barry McGuigan in Belfast. There's very few featherweights that could have beat Barry McGuigan that night in Belfast with his dad singing Danny Boy. And the thing that was great about it, at least, is once you got into the early 80s, you got fights like Laporte, the 2 Lockridge's fights, the Lujan fight, the McGuigan fight. Those were on free over-the-air TV in the United States, where really late 70s with the competition he fought, you didn't see him. And you know this because you went back and you watched a lot of those fights, and a lot of those fights up until before 1980, almost every one of them, you have to watch it in Spanish.
Yeah, that's true. And you talk about the Pat Forde fight. I thought that was interesting too, because I just think it points out the adage that a lot of us are familiar with, that styles make fights. Okay, so Pedroza was able to stop Pat Forde. Obviously, Sanchez struggled with him, and then you look at Pat Caldell, who also gave Sanchez all sorts of troubles. I think that was a split decision win for Sanchez, and then Azuma Nelson, knocks him out with relative ease. He just caught up with him quickly, and that was that. But yeah, you're right. I mean, and you would wish that a guy. Again, there was some fodder there, of course, just like with anybody, but it wasn't Samuel Serrano type fodder where he was getting some Koreans who were completely unworthy in there, just a chain of them. But yeah, it was the fact that he fought Lockridge twice, and Laporte, who was obviously very, very good as well, and Bernard Taylor, who's a damn good fighter himself.
Yeah.
And then Barry McGuigan. I mean, that was that. And actually, You talked about the stoppage early on in his career against Zamora. Zamora's an underrated fighter as well, and I know this is about Pedroza, but I think Zamora stopped him in the first round and it clipped him with a beautiful right hand. And Zamora's one of those guys that I really liked. I mean, he was unlike a lot of these guys. He was pretty muscular and just seemed to have bricks for hands. Zamora was actually the bantamweight champion for a little while there too. But yeah, I mean, Pedroza had a damn good reign. And, it's unfortunate that him and Rocky Lockridge are in the state that they're in. But hopefully if they do kick the bucket, they'll be commemorated properly. And boxing fans could give them, big RIP.
Yeah, you talk about Zamora. I don't know if you remember this. I know you don't remember it, but you might have read about it. But his fight with Carlos Zarate in Inglewood, California at the Forum, or what was called the Fabulous Forum, was actually an enormous fight when they met. That was two of the biggest punchers in that division's history. And if you've ever seen that, Zarate stops Zamora in, I think it was in the third or fourth round. But that was two bangers that went after it. And probably in the bantamweight division, it's one of the biggest fights that's ever been held.
Yeah, well, not only that, I think you would agree with me, but I think Zamora was ruined after that.
Yeah. He was. Plus, I mean, back then, guys didn't fight as long as they do today. For some reason, especially at bantamweight, when you went downhill pretty quickly. So, he was about, I think he scored, I think there was only one guy that ever went the distance with him. I know he lost 5 fights, but I think all of those were kind of in the last 7 or 8 fights of his career.
Yeah, no, I think it was 3 guys who ended up going the distance, but it was, I think...
Well, I mean, up until the fight with Zarate, because I thought his career ended up... No, I thought he ended up with 33 wins and like 32 knockouts. I could be wrong.
Okay, sorry, I was thinking you were talking about Zarate himself.
No, not Zarate. Zarate is a vastly forgotten fighter, too, that shouldn't be.
Yeah, like a lot of these guys, and that's why I got to give credit to a guy named Rick Ferris on Facebook, and he also runs the West Coast Boxing Hall of Fame, and he's real big into this sort of history, the forum, to post tons of West Coast fighters and, guys who used to train out there and fight out there. I mean, in his perspective is that a lot of these guys, like we talked about Luis Vega against Sugar Ray Leonard last night, well, his opinion is that lots of these guys had deceptive records because it was kind of the Mexican way, right? And it's still that way to a degree where you just came up tough. I mean, you just were thrown in. A lot of these guys didn't have amateur background, so you were thrown in the deep water. And if you sank, you sank. If you swam, well, just like guys like Margarito and many of these hard luck guys, you just took a few L's on the way up, and that was that. But a lot of these guys were conditioned because of it. But, some of them, because a lot of these were come forward aggressors, their career didn't last as long.
All right, what do you got for us on this day, Jeremiah?
So on this day, and I think a lot of people would be fond of this one, and it's the Muhammad Ali versus Terrell fight. And of course, this is famous for a good number of reasons, one of which Ali whipped Terrell's ass, but also because it's the fight in which Terrell was saying he was calling him Cassius Clay instead of Muhammad Ali, and Ali was whipping his ass and saying, "What's my name? What is my name?"
Okay. Your name is Jeremiah.
That's right.
The thing I remember about it is this. Ernie Terrell actually wasn't a terrible fighter. He won a split decision over a slightly older Cleveland Williams. But you look at him, and to get the title, he beat Eddie Macon by unanimous decision. I think then he beats George Chuvalo, beats Doug Jones. George Chuvalo, Doug Jones, solid fighters. But Ernie Terrell was just not on the level of Muhammad Ali. And if you've ever watched that fight, if you haven't, I think you can find it on YouTube. He just took some massive beatings. And if you fast forward like 6 years, he lost to Chuck Wepner.
Well, I'll be damned. And that was almost his last fight, too. But
yeah.
no.
Jeff Merritt, I think, was his last fight.
Yeah, absolutely. And, it was one of these fights that often gets, put around as being one of Ali's best performances. And, I've seen a lot of detractors who were, saying Terrell was over the hill, and that very well might have been the case, but it was an ass whooping. It was kind of one of those things where it was just such a complete domination that it kind of goes in the annals of complete domination. So, there are those few title fights here and there where you're just like, it's just one-sided throughout. One guy's confident throughout, and that was Ali against Terrell.
Yeah, it was damn
Terrell.
near like Holmes and Cobb.
Yeah, absolutely. Yes,
where he just destroyed him. And the thing about the Terrell-Wepner fight, have you seen the movie Chuck?
No, I haven't yet.
Okay, they made the movie Chuck about Chuck Wepner's career. Really good movie. But they made another movie about Chuck Wepner, which I mistakenly paid $6 for on Amazon the other night, called The Brawler. And it's just not very good. I mean, the guy that's supposed to be Chuck Wepner looks like a model. And this is no offense to Chuck, who's been on the show before, but Chuck Wepner didn't look like a model. The other thing that got me is they still try to make it look like he hit Ali with a body punch and knocked him down, which was not true about Wepner. And the other thing is Wepner and Ernie Terrell, they actually made it look like Wepner beat him easily. And when you go back, because I've got the Ring magazine from there, and Harold Vallon is back when just the referee scored the fight in New Jersey. And Harold Vallon raised his hand, and the unofficial Ring magazine scorecard was 9-3 for Terrell. And there's a quote from Terrell, or from Wepner after the fight. He said, "There is no way I'll get in the ring with Ernie Terrell again. If they want me to meet him, they've got to give me my title back." I don't know what his title is, but he was obviously beaten stupid by it.
Yeah, well, with the whole Chuck movie, that's got to be the selling point, right? It's the whole he knocked him down. I mean, because it's the baseline for a lot of folklore, right? I mean, the Rocky movies, were partly based on Chuck Wepner and his performance against Ali.
You've got to watch The Brawler, because the guy that plays Rocky Sylvester Stallone is absolutely horrible. The guy that plays Muhammad Ali looks nothing like Muhammad Ali. I mean, the whole movie is just, it's not very good. I mean,
the hell did they even? Did they consult Chuck? I mean, because in the new Chuck Wepner, which is called Chuck, and is played by what's the guy who used to? Damn it, he does
the voiceover for HBO. What the hell is?
Yeah, exactly.
Lee
Schreiber.
Liv Schreiber. Yeah.
Liev Schreiber. Yes. Yeah. So I mean, so I know in Chuck, I actually. Liev Schreiber was on NPR doing an interview before the Chuck movie was released, and seemed like a down-to-earth guy, and he seemed like he really liked working with Chuck, and he was talking about some of the stories with Chuck. I think there was one, and I could be a little off here, but he was talking about how there was this part where Chuck really wrestled a bear or something.
Yeah,
and
that
Chuck
was in his second movie too. They were in all the movies.
Yeah. So how it went with the Chuck movie with Schreiber was Chuck was on the sidelines watching. He was real involved in the production, and Schreiber was he was meant to wrestle a bear, and Chuck was like, "Well, aren't you really going to wrestle a real bear?" And they're like, "No, we don't really do that sort of stuff in movies anymore." And I guess Chuck just seemed disappointed. But back to Terrell. Sorry, Terrell. God, I don't know. I keep saying that. But back to Terrell with that Macon thing. The one thing about Ali when he fought Terrell was what I appreciated, because Ali, we both know he was kind of viewed as a loudmouth, and a lot of the loudmouth people are kind of viewed as having a yellow streak, right? They can talk big, but they can't take it. But in that fight, he had a mean streak. When he was telling him, "Hey, what's my name, bitch?" He was gritting his teeth while he was, tossing off some of those flashy combinations and really putting some mustard behind some of the shots. I mean, he didn't get it done and knock him out before the bell rang, but that's what I got out of that fight. Was he was just mean in that one.
Yeah, I also think I got from it that Ali completely ruined him, because I think after that he loses to Thad Spencer, he loses to Manuel Ramos. They weren't bad fighters, but I mean, after that, he went on a win streak. He loses the fight to Wepner and Merritt. My guess, the loss to Wepner, it's pretty much known that Chuck Wepner was a leg breaker at one point, so maybe somebody had something to do with that. But you got to give it to the guy. I mean, he won a portion of the heavyweight title. Wasn't the real heavyweight title because Muhammad Ali is the real heavyweight champion of the world at that time. But he did beat George Chuvalo, Eddie Macon, and Doug Jones, who were all three good fighters. He also beat Bob Foster. He knocked Bob Foster out. Beat Zora Foley, Cleveland Williams. So, I mean, that's not a bad resume. I know that Foley and Williams were a little older. But Foley, that is, the year he beat Foley was still the same year, I think, that Foley and Chuvalo had to fight it a year, and I think it was in 1963.
Yeah, well, and I would say that Macon was a pretty good fighter too. I'm not real up and up on that era of heavyweights, but Macon is a guy that I can appreciate. I mean, he had some spotty stuff, but you watch his performance against Sonny Liston, he boxed smartly and ended up lasting the distance. I mean, there's tons of ink that's been spilled on pages because of, how intimidating Liston was and whatnot. But, Macon was one of those guys who ended up going the distance. And again, you watch that fight. Yeah, he loses it, but he was boxing smartly, kept on his toes, lasted the distance. And he was just a rock solid guy.
Yeah. And Macon, I think he lost to Carl Mildenberger over in Germany. I think that is the fight that got Mildenberger the shot against Ali. He beat Jerry Quarry in 1966, and that was Quarry pretty much at his best. And then, of course, he fought Joe Frazier, and that didn't work out too good for anybody back in the late 60s. So the last three fights, I think, were Frazier, and then he lost to Henry Clark and Boone Kirkman. And I think Boone Kirkman was one of the 5 guys in Toronto that George Foreman beat.
Well, yeah, and George Johnson. Manuel Ramos. We talked about him. I think it's a guy that George Foreman beat the crap out of in his first title defense. But George Johnson. He's kind of one of those guys you can gloss over easily too. But he had an awesome nickname in Scrap Iron.
Yeah.
But I mean, yeah. Oh, absolutely. And I think Macon handed Corey his first loss, if I'm not mistaken.
In 66, I don't know about that.
Now we gotta run on box rec now.
No, I'm trying to think. Did Corey beat Patterson? Or no, I thought Patterson beat Corey, didn't he? That was in 63. I can't remember who won the fight.
No,
I've seen the fight a few times.
Corey beat Patterson.
It was a great fight.
So it was a majority decision. Yes, but I had to hop on. Yeah, I had to, but no, he beat Patterson by a majority decision. No, okay, so the first one was a draw, and the second one, let's see.
Yeah, I know Corey lost to Ellis in the tournament, and that would have been 68, because he beat Thad Spencer and Floyd Patterson.
Yeah, there you go. So he had a draw with Patterson in the first.
I know he had a couple draws, because he had 2 draws with a guy I've heard of, Tony something. Tony Alongi, I think. But I'm not sure.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah, he had a draw with him twice.
And he had
lost to
draw
Macon
with a dude named Tony also in like 63 or 64.
Yeah.
I did a show about Jerry Quarry with Christopher Shelton. This is why I remember it. I remember he had 3 draws with Tonys. 2 of them were Alongi, and the other one was Tony. All right, I'm going to look at Box Rec.
Yep, that's the savior.
Tony Doyle. Okay, I had the first name right, but it just stuck out to me that he, had 3 draws with guys named Tony. Then he had a draw with Floyd Patterson later on. But
right. Yeah.
Let's see. We are at 35 minutes. So we're going to wrap this up because Jeremiah has a previous engagement. So we're going to wrap this up tonight. We will have to be back tomorrow night at 11 o'clock then, Jeremiah. Is that all right?
That's all right with me.
Because we've got an Indiana basketball post-game show after the IU game, which is at 11 o'clock. So I'll just make Risley wait until we're done with the boxing show. And we'll see if John wants to come on tomorrow night with us at 11. I want to thank everybody for listening to us on Inside Boxing Daily. You can hear us tomorrow night at 11 o'clock Eastern. You will be able to hear us Friday night at 11 o'clock Eastern also. So make sure you follow us at Grilling Truth. You can follow us on Twitter, just the boxing. What's the handle on the boxing page?
So it is at TGTN Boxing.
Okay, that's easy. At TGTN Boxing. You can hear
That's
all
right.
the shows live at 11 o'clock, Monday through Friday. If you miss a live show, you can always get the podcast on thegruelingtruth.net, Spreaker, Spotify, YouTube, iTunes, pretty much anywhere you find sports podcasts.
Yeah, Last FM.
Yeah, pretty much everywhere. If they have podcasts, you'll be able to find us. So we will catch you guys tomorrow night. Make sure you go check out the Ringside Boxing Show with John and Dennis. Also, Michael Montero's The Neutral Corner. Both are on thegruelingtruth.net. So you can check them out if you listen to us. But just make sure you listen to us first. All right, guys. We're going to wrap it up. Anything else, Jeremiah?
No, I mean, I just want to press the issue. I mean, if you like what we're doing here, give us some feedback. I mean, Mike and I both have thick skin. We'd love to improve the show. We're willing to take questions or any segments you guys want to see added to the show. Anything you guys recommend, I'm all for it. I mean, doing this nightly, we need material. I mean, not every day, especially during this time of year where it's kind of a down period. Whatever you guys want to see, just throw me a bone on Facebook. That's my preferred social media. Twitter, that's fine too. Just anywhere, but do so. Help us improve. Help us get better. What'd you say?
I didn't say anything.
Okay, sorry. It must have been a hiccup in the technical thing. But yeah, no, just let us know, and we want to make this the best show possible, the most listened to show. Just let us know.
All right, guys. We're going to go ahead and wrap it up. Catch us tomorrow night at 11 o'clock Eastern on Inside Boxing Daily. For Jeremiah Preisser, I'm Mike Goodpaster. You've been listening to The Grueling Truth, where the legends speak.